Our correspondent Amritpal Singh joins us from Johannesburg. Amrit, just a while back, we told our viewers about the highlights of the G20 declaration. Prime Minister at present is participating in the third and the last session at the G20 summit. But before that, we also saw Prime Minister hold meetings with his counterparts at the 6th IBSA summit. Get us more as to what all was taken on the table when we talk of the 6th IBSA summit between the leaders.
All right, so this morning started with the bilateral meeting, a very significant bilateral meeting between President Ramaphosa and Prime Minister Modi. This meeting was significant from the point of view, of course, because South Africa holds the presidency. What we saw, what you were listing out in the leaders' declaration or the Johannesburg declaration, what India started at New Delhi, the outcomes of India New Delhi were taken forward at Johannesburg and consolidated on that. Say climate financing was, there were targets put to it. It was quantifiable. So in a way, the agenda of the global South is clearly stamped on the leaders' declaration at Johannesburg, and in which New Delhi played a significant role. And I think when the two leaders met, they reiterated to strengthen the bilateral relationship, of course, but also take coordinated positions and keep the momentum alive to see that G20 remains focused on the development agenda, on the priorities, concerns and aspirations of the global South, and does not slip back into a global North-driven grouping, because next year the presidency goes to the United States. Of course, things will be different from what they have been in the past 4 years, because the presidency does have the leverage to impact the outcomes. So, these leaders coming together signifies that they are expressing solidarity within the grouping, and it's a signaling to the grouping. Bilateral relations were, of course, discussed, how India could partner and strengthen with South Africa, and not just South Africa, by extension the whole African continent. If you remember yesterday in a polar side with the president of Angola, who's also the president of the African Union, the two sides had reiterated India's commitment, and also the Prime Minister's 6 proposals, including healthcare initiatives or skilling initiatives for Africa. 1 million certified trainers for the continent of Africa in the next decade signifies the importance India attaches to the African continent. So that figured between in the talks between the two leaders. Then it was followed by IBSA. Now, IBSA it was a very significant meeting from two perspectives. One, Preeti, because this is happening after more than a decade at the leaders' level. The foreign ministers have been talking to each other. This is significant because this is happening on the margins of the G20, whose leaders' declaration clearly factored in the concerns of the global South. Now, these 3 countries, President Lula representing Brazil in the Latin American continent, President Ramaphosa representing a big country of the African continent, a big leader of the global South, and India, of course, as the leader of the global South, and also a major power in the Asian continent. So the 3 leaders, I think, at that meeting touched upon a whole range of issues, including taking developmental concerns, keeping the focus on that, reform of multilateral institutions, including multilateral banks, the issues on the finance track, especially restructuring of debts, the debt vulnerability, climate financing, climate combat financing. So all this would have come up for discussion. And I think the world would have taken notice, especially the developed countries in the G20 would have taken the significance of IBSA leaders summit on the sidelines of the G20 summit would not have been lost on the Western leaders who are here. Keir Starmer, though, left last evening, but he was here. Emmanuel Macron is still here. So the leaders of the developed world would have taken note of that. America in particular, who is absent from this meeting, would have taken note, because the signaling solidarity amongst the global south is a strong signal to the Americans that though the global south does not want a confrontational approach with the West or the United States in particular, but we've seen acrimony over tariffs, coercion that America under the presidentship of Donald Trump has resorted to, and if they collaborate, and the message the Americans would be getting is very clear, that their sitting out of the G20 does not affect the grouping. Though the Americans haven't gone to the extent of pulling out, or there's no such possibility that exists, or weakening the grouping of G20. But if President Trump's assessment of by boycotting G20 at this level would affect outcomes, I think today's meeting and yesterday's declaration would have sent that message across very, very clearly. Preeti.
All right, Amrit, you stay with us. At this point, we're joined in by Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. He's former senior diplomat. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on DD India News Hour this afternoon. Our correspondent Amrit joins us from Johannesburg, and he in detail explained to us the day's proceedings so far in South Africa. But I would want you to evaluate for us how has been India's participation so far, with Prime Minister suggesting 6 points at the G20 summit. How do you evaluate the performance of India?
Yeah, thank you very much, Preeti, for having me. I think, as Amrita has very in detail and comprehensively explained, I think the participation of India has been very proactive, and in terms of ideas and vision for the G20, it has been very seminal, as was to be expected. There were very many commentaries saying that, since several of the major global leaders like Donald Trump, like Xi Jinping, like Mr. Putin, they are not going to be present. So the responsibility and the significance of Prime Minister Modi's participation increases. My view has been, Preeti, that India has always been a very important voice, a very important player, particularly over the last 3-4 years that we've seen the cycle of 4 countries taking the mantle of the presidency of G20, developing countries, members of the global south. And in that, particularly the presidency of India has been very significant, has stood out for a variety of reasons. The first of that I could say is that after Indonesia, because during the time of Indonesia in 22, that was the time when Russia-Ukraine conflict had just taken place. And rather than focusing on the economic issues, on the economic agenda, the whole year was literally spent on how to get a formulation in the final declaration which would be acceptable to everyone. And that also solution was provided by India by what the Prime Minister had told Mr. Putin in Samarkand on the sidelines of the SCO summit in September, that this is not an era of war. By using that formulation, I think we were able to get over that hump and able to get a final declaration. But after that, the real work started, and the real work was done by India. The heavy lifting was done by India when right within the first 10-12 days, we started with the first Voice of the Global South Summit on the 12th and 13th of January. And that is basically, what Amrit has also been speaking about, that, the 2 summits that took place after that, one in Rio de Janeiro, that is last year, and now in Johannesburg, they have taken forward the Indian agenda. So, we've been discussing on your channel in great detail as to what the final declaration, it has a huge imprint of what India launched, India initiated, India started, whether it is in the area of climate justice, it is in the area of debt, it is a total focus on the aspirations and concerns of the global south as far as the whole issue of terrorism is concerned, multilateral development banks, how they should move forward in terms of taking care of the interest, the debt burden, the debt vulnerability of developing countries, how that needs to be dealt with in terms of the women-led development growth. So across the board, the imprint of India cannot be missed in terms of also the importance of traditional medicines, how that needs to be done. And along with that, what Prime Minister Modi has done is he has given six more new initiatives, fresh initiatives, and basically in terms the focus of most of them also is on developing countries, how the competence, the capacities and capabilities of the global south countries, how that can be increased. So, to sum it up, I think India's imprint is very, very clear, and India is also drawing a roadmap for the future as to how the G20 countries should go forward. And I think this message has, Preeti, gone out to the global north, to the developed countries, that they cannot grow, they cannot prosper unless they take the global south countries also along with themselves.
Yes, that brings me to the next question. So you're talking of global south, and Amrit also very, comprehensively explained to us what does the sixth IBSA summit mean to the world happening on the margins of the G20 summit. Three very prominent countries of the global south coming together. How does the world look at it? And also for these, these respective three countries of global south, when they come together, what is the potential, what is the caliber when these three countries come together on this global page? Added to that, another priority for them is not to come forth as an alternative force to the global north.
Yeah, I think in addition to the fact that all these countries, these three countries, are very significant, are very prominent members of the global south, I think we also need to remember that these are all democratic countries. And three democracies coming together, I think that has a significance of its own. Because democracy at the moment is under, I'll not say it's under attack, but it's a little on the back foot, because there are authoritarian and autocratic countries around the world. Without my naming it, I'm sure your viewers will understand and appreciate, who are saying that democracies have failed, democracies have not been able to deliver the right results as far as improving the living conditions of the people is concerned, and the alternate model that they are proposing, that is of autocracies, is better suited to bringing improving the conditions of the people. And I think countries like India have definitely proven that democracies can deliver, democracies are successful, and the fact that these three countries are coming together. If I may just add as an aside, that when BRICS came into being, and BRICS is only two more countries, that is Russia and China, then there was an attempt by China particularly, saying that IBSA is already included in BRICS, so it doesn't really need to exist as a separate entity, as a separate organization, body. But India was very particular that I think democracy is a value. It's a very important value which we need to cherish, which we need also to nourish. So I think that is number one, that all these three are democracies. Also, these three countries are growing. They are, emerging economies, and they are literally leaders of the global south, and the leadership has been palpable. It has been evident over the last 3 years, definitely, when one after the other they have taken the mantle, at the helm of affairs as far as G20 are concerned, and they have taken forward the concerns, anxieties of the G20. So I think these countries coming together, the leadership coming together after a decade, I think that sends out a very strong message. Particularly, I think it would be because if you look at the United States, at the current moment, the imposition of tariffs on India has been 50% the highest in the world. Imposition of tariffs on Brazil, highest in the world, 50%. Mr. Trump has refused to come to South Africa because of the alleged violation of human rights and the genocide of white Afrikaners, which the South African president has completely rejected this argument. So the point I'm making is that the United States relations of that country with these three countries are not all that good and definitely need to be better. So under the circumstances, these countries coming together and engaging with all the other countries of the global north. All of them have been there, whether it is the United Kingdom, France, although there have been these are challenging times for Europe also. There's a challenging time for Japan also in terms of its relations with China. But that notwithstanding, these countries have recognized the significance and importance of the G20 and have made themselves available. They have come here.
Right.
So there are bridges of cooperation and collaboration being constructed between the global north and the global south.
All right, I'll take that forward to Amrit. Now, Amrit, such forums talk of collaboration, as Sir also put forward. But then I would want to understand from you, how difficult is it for the nations to talk of, collaboration on the global page, at the same time taking forward their domestic interests? Now, the countries which are participating back home, they have their respective interests as well. On such a, on a global forum like this, G20, what does it mean? How binding are are the decisions or the points in the declaration which you just read out to our viewers? How binding is that for that to be continued to be taken to the next presidency?
The decisions of the G20, the outcomes are not binding on the member nations. They may they may reflect in the leaders' declaration. They may decide, but it's not binding. And often we've seen nations fall short of the commitments that they make at such summits. And that's a problem with most multilateral, groupings. Because, as you rightly said, that individual interests vary within the grouping of G20. The more developed countries, the developed countries will have their own interests, their own agenda. The global South countries have a different agenda. And that's what how it works at between countries at the multilateral fora. What the countries put their political weight behind, they collaborate, they cooperate with each other because their interests coincide. So within the G20, the 20 most powerful economies or the 20 largest economies will have something in common. They will agree to things on things that are affecting them collectively. They will take collective stance on things they do not see eye to eye. That consensus does not emerge. That's left outside the outcome document, etc. But the fact remains that within the grouping, smaller groupings emerge as, say, for example, they've been able to push the agenda of the Global South, and in the Johannesburg outcome or the declaration, Johannesburg Declaration, the stamp of the Global South's priorities is clearly evident. So that's how it works. But, or even say IBSA. In IBSA, it was, IBSA wasn't taking off. The general critique was that with the coming of the BRICS, IBSA had lost its relevance. But we know when it comes to China, China has its own priorities, which may be very different from the large priorities of the Global South. So there are differences, and therefore the relevance of IBSA and the importance of this leaders meeting taking place here in Johannesburg. So within the grouping, smaller groups collaborate to protect and propagate their interests. And so, Preeti, that's how it works.
All right, Amrit, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for joining in with those inputs, and thank you so much, sir, for joining us with your insights on DD News Hour. We were joined in by Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. He put forth his reading of the G20 summit and the takeaways so far. He analyzed for us the declaration, and we also had inputs coming in from our correspondent Amrit, joining us from Johannesburg, getting us the latest from there.